Hi, I am a hammer. There is a phrase that says he's a tool, and it's used derogatorily, and I don't know where it comes from. I don't care. Um, I know what it means in that tone and in that intention. Here's a thought: every one of us is a tool, and we can either do the thing that we were intended to do and use that skill, that talent, that capability to help others, or we can try to be someone we aren't, and we will always be struggling to be someone we aren't. Here's the story of the how why I describe myself as a hammer. One of my last assignments in the U.S. Army, my boss had two plans teams that he needed to create from his organization. One was going to plan the next exercise that was happening in Japan, and one was going to plan the next exercise that was going to happen in Alaska. And I was the senior time in the Army, time in grade person on my boss's team. And there was another guy who was I was the most senior and he was the most junior. But he got the assignment to Japan which is the more prestigious, more high profile project. And I was the team leader for the team planning the exercise in Alaska. I, that's neither here nor there how I felt about it. I was totally happy with it because it was effectively my getting out of the Army. Um, the fact is, my counterpart, 5 years younger in life and in the Army and in experience, was a much more culturally nuanced kind of person. And handling the nuances of engaging with our Japanese allies was he was much more suited for than my approach to problem solving. Meanwhile, my role in the exercise in Alaska was kind of superfluous in a way because although it was an international exercise, the international component was very minor. The majority of the participants were U.S. Army, U.S. military organizations, um, primarily U.S. Army organizations commanded by or led by 06 full colonels, and that's where the level of understanding needs to be. As a lieutenant colonel, I was junior to all of them, but I represented the 3-star general out of JBLM, Fort Lewis, Washington State, to the planning team that was happening in Alaska. So the very first planning conference, my role was to brief formally to all of these American colonels, this is the 3-star general's guidance to you for how this exercise, the outcomes he wants from this exercise. We're going to, in a planning conference, decide how to execute, how to develop a training event that will accomplish the 3-star general's objective. And then for the rest of the planning conference, I kind of just floated from room to room, watching the various subordinate plans teams move forward, kind of develop a construct, and um, and then we had an out brief, and again I got to stand up and give a formal presentation saying this is the commanding general's overarching guidance, and right now it looks like we're on track to implement that. At the mid planning conference, I stood up and I gave the same kind of introductory briefing, and then the rest of the briefing went on. And there was a moment, and then we went to the planning teams, and there was I could detect some rumblings that one of the American colonels was getting more of his way than that was going to cause the other organizations to be in more of a supporting role instead of also getting training value. And so I highlighted this in my outbrief from that. Hey, I think we need to make sure that we follow the three-star general's guidance, that every one of these organizations that are commanded by equal ranking, um, but not necessarily um, politically equal colonels. All of them, all those organizations need to achieve their training objective. And I come back to the final planning conference, and I'm listening to the initial brief for the planning conference. And it's clear that this one colonel is getting his way, and everyone else is having to get just whatever's left value out of the event. And I stand up and I address the leader of the room. And, sir, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Keith Bashirs. I represent General Alonza, and his guidance is, and I spoke for less than 2 minutes, a minute and a half, maybe. And I sat back down, and the tone in the room changed. And that colonel that was getting all of his own way physically turned to the person next to him and said, I literally, I was far enough away in the room. I don't know what words were said, but effectively, what can I do to make sure that your unit gets training value too? The tone changed because my boss had sent the right tool to that planning conference when it was not necessary for me to be engaged. I was perfectly happy to be there listening to what was happening. When there came a moment where we needed a decision, a change of the route we were going, we didn't need a screwdriver with finesse to say, hey, let's make a little tiny tweak here. We needed a hammer that said, we're moving in a wrong direction. Let's do a course correction. And I got back to JBLM, and my boss calls me in and says, hey, what happened in that planning conference? I said, well, it looked like we were going off track. So I reiterated the general's planning guidance. My boss says, okay, that's what I thought happened. But I got some information, got some call that I wanted to check. If there's any issue, I'll ask for more information. He never called me back for more information. So I'm Keith Bashirs. I'm the bald guy. I do marketing stuff for small businesses. And sometimes those small businesses need minor finesse and tweaks, and I might have to refer somebody that does graphic design or copywriting. If what that small business needs is, let's solve a problem, I'm your guy.